is still speaking the word of God.
Thanks be to God. That same day, Jesus went out and sat beside the sea. Scripture this morning, so well read by Nancy, begins with this incredible line, a line from which volumes could be written. Jesus went out of the house and sat beside the sea. What a profound image. An image of tranquility, a vision of Sabbath keeping, an icon of stillness. With Jesus, we go outside. We smell that salt air. We hear the kingfishers call. We are caressed by the breeze. Why does Jesus go out and sit down by the sea? To seek God, to be still and know that God is God, to be moved by the profundity of nature, to leave his house, the distractions therein, and enter the sanctuary, the theater of God's glory, the natural world? Yes. Who among us has not been stopped at some point in our lives by looking out over the sea? And I wonder, too, if Jesus was stopped, awed by that sacred line of blue on blue. But I also wonder if he goes out to sit by the sea because he is exhausted. He needs a break. That same day, Jesus went out and sat beside the sea. What happened that day? In the preceding chapter of 12 of Matthew, the scope of this day is tiringly detailed. It's the Sabbath, and Jesus walks out through the cornfields with his friends. They're hungry and pluck some grains to eat. Ever lurking, the self-righteous religious authorities try to call his disciples out, while Jesus responds, calling out his critics' hypocrisy. Then Jesus goes into a synagogue and heals someone. The authorities don't like this and begin to conspire how to destroy him, the text says. Jesus departs again, followed by many crowds, and he cures all who come to him, including someone judged as a demoniac. More conspiring against him follows by the powers and the principalities. And Jesus calls out, "Every kingdom divided against itself is laid waste, and no city or house divided against itself will stand." Finally, while he is speaking to the crowds, his mother and siblings come to him, wanting to speak to him. I wonder if they were coming to scold him, to tell him to pipe down, to respect the law, to stay in his lane, to lay low. Jesus, this just isn't the right time for such a mission. People aren't quite ready for the things to topple. So much change at once in the name of justice. Jesus, likely exhausted, perhaps crestfallen or angry, refuses to see them and instead declares that anyone who does the will of God is his mother or sibling. And then we come to this chapter 13, and his house leaving and his seaside sitting. And he looks out, perhaps exhausted, perhaps introspective, perhaps longing for a word or a sign of hope. From sunup to perhaps now nearing sundown, Jesus has been acting all day out of love with a full heart, healing, feeding, listening, liberating, but continually not being heard, not being seen, even by his closest kin. And his love is actively agitating empire. But by coming out into nature, by sitting on that shoreline, Jesus begins to paint a new picture for all of us of what kinship really looks like. The sea listens. The sea hears. The sea sees Jesus. Mother Earth, sibling sea, I see you, Jesus. Welcome home. The text only places a period between the words see and such great crowds, the words that begin verse 2. But we can linger there for a while and imagine Jesus breathing deep into that sacred shoreline. But then all too quickly, as so often the narrative in our gospel goes, the crowds come once again, eager to encounter the great healer, hungry for words of liberation. And in looking up and seeing them, perhaps with a glint of compassion in his weary eye, Jesus pivots. The crowds crowd around, and creative Jesus pivots from the beach and finds a boat and casts off to create space as the crowds inundate his formerly solitary sandy sanctuary. Then, using the natural amplification of the sea to his advantage, Jesus speaks to their hunger. His words echo loud and clear off the waters. And as is his practice, he tells a story, one we've likely heard before and know well, the parable of a sower, seeds, and soil. A story about a wildly abundant sower who tosses her seeds with abandon, some never hitting soil, some not taking root, some choked by weeds, and some finding deep soil bliss. I wonder if Jesus brought the exhaustion and possible frustration of his day into the telling of this very story. Remember, he's been doing his best all day to live into God's love and invite others to do the same, but again and again encounters misunderstanding, opposition, and outright oppression. I wonder if before the crowds came, Jesus had been trying to make sense of his day and this negativity while on that beach. I wonder if he was trying to imagine new approaches, new connections, new innovations, so his words might land and take root. Without his contemplation by the sea, I wonder if a suddenly crowded out Jesus, forced into a boat, might begin to focus on a judgmental, vindictive God who tells people they reap what they sow, an eye for an eye, tooth for tooth theology. But notice the contrast here. Jesus instead lets fly a story about an abundant creator, sower, farmer God who doesn't hoard her seeds but casts them with what seems like joyful extravagance. Did the wild ocean air inspire such truths of a wildly abundant, constant gardener God? The great liberationist, mystic, Trappist monk Thomas Merton wrote about this divine extravagance in his 1962 book, New Seeds of Contemplation. Every moment and every event of every person's life on earth plants something in her or his soul. For just as the wind carries thousands of winged seeds, so each moment brings with it germs of spiritual vitality that come to rest imperceptibly in the minds and the wills of people. Most of these unnumbered seeds perish and are lost, for such seeds as these cannot spring up anywhere except in the good soil of freedom, spontaneity, and love. For Merton, every moment is filled with the spiritual vitality flowing freely from our sower God. This truth underlies Jesus' parable. The question for us, dear friends, becomes, how do we cultivate the good soil of freedom, spontaneity, and love in order to best receive the gift of these free seeds? For we, like Jesus, have been having a long day. The demands of living in face of at least 3 main pandemics we are facing right now have been intense. Freedom feels trumped by structural racism and police brutality. Spontaneity feels trumped by COVID's relentless rise around us. Love feels trumped by the injustices of climate chaos. Yes, I use my verb here with intention. So yes, we could all use some time on retreat by the sea, especially in this humidity. But the unmasked crowds seemed to swarm around us way closer than 6 feet, and we, like Jesus, are being asked to pivot. A buzzword that's becoming a buzzkill that's been killing us with its constant need to recreate, pivot. Job descriptions constantly shifting. Worship now online, as Anita Graham likes to call it, church TV. Summer camps now online, occupational, physical therapy, mental health counseling, all online, seeing grandkids mainly online. This fall, school is on, school is off, school is hybrid, the chaos of parenting while homeschooling and working, funerals and weddings on Zoom, restaurants with tables in parking lots, musicians on back decks becoming audiovisual experts overnight, one-way aisled grocery shopping, the list goes on and on. Friends, pivoting is exhausting. Exhausting, of course, but essential. Remember flying in planes? Something some people used to do before March 2020. I remember flying home once from visiting dear family in Montana over Colorado and looking out on a perfectly clear day across those incredible Great Plains. And I looked down and saw for miles and miles these perfect green, multi-hued circles, massive circles. Center pivots, or central pivot irrigation, something you may have seen before. Looking out, have you looked out of a plane, perhaps, to see? Have you looked out and see not just the sea, but have you seen the sea of green? These dots that come close. These dots that keep us focused in different ways. I imagine some of you have seen these before. These circles. These circles, center pivot irrigation systems, were innovations in the mid part of the 20th century. They were essential from transitioning the Great Plains from a desert to food production. Sadly, though, like many innovations in the American experiment, they came with unintended consequences. For these pivots became large drawers of water, depleting the Ogallala Aquifer drastically, allowing waterways like the Colorado River no longer to run into the sea. We took too much by growing too much because of greed, not because of need, and we've suffered as a result. A new dust bowl, some climatologists call it. The pivot Jesus is inviting us into is not one that spins around and around again in an endless circle, landing us back to where we first began. It's a pivot that moves us in a new and lasting direction. It's sustainable. Such a pivot is central to the Spirit's call, but it's very different than the greed seen in a central pivot. It sends us into a new normal without bringing us back to normal, into new ways of kinship and kingdom of deep, productive soils that allow for deep roots and no water abuse. Friends, Jesus is inviting us to sit beside the sea, to get out of the familiar places and go and listen with a new sense of kinship to what God is calling us into. To take time, to contemplate, to slow down, to be still. I am incredibly grateful for the chance that I will have, starting after next week, to begin my annual summer Sabbath. This critical time for me to take a step back from the demands of ministry, the constant pivoting, and to be with my family in a deeper way, to be still with God, and hopefully to be outside in nature. This year especially, I'm taking inspiration from Reverend Steve Blackmer, who started Church of the Woods in New Hampshire, a friend of mine. His church meets outside every week. Their sanctuary is the woods. And since Easter, Steve has been doing something extra. He is getting into a pustynia, a Russian monastic word which connotes desert, which is a secluded place. He's built a small house where he has gathered himself in the midst of these pandemics, not to avoid them, but to go deeper into them. He sees prayer and contemplation as essential parts of the call to social justice and to respond to the crises we are in. He has invited all who are interested to submit prayers to him that he's checking regularly, and he's praying for us. He's praying for Church of the Covenant, and I'm grateful for that. He's praying for me personally and my family, and I'm grateful for that. Friends, as much as all of us can, we may not have the gift of 4 weeks, but we have the gift every single day. We can create the gift of 4 minutes. 4 minutes, 4 seconds, any intention of slowing down and seeking God is essential to the work to which we are called. For it is in such a reflection that we, like Seaside Jesus, might remember the abundance of God, even in the face of great challenges. We might begin to look for the good news beyond the dire headlines. We might see the freedom emerge in the incredible and prophetic leadership of young women of color who are leading such sustained protests over these past months for racial justice. We might see the spontaneity emerging as people who continue to push beyond the inconvenience of wearing masks and to faithfully wear them as expressions of loving their neighbor. We might see the love behind the amazing news this past week related to the 3 highly unjust, climate-changing, dirty pipelines, the shutdown of the Dakota Access Pipeline. Many of us have been following the lead of indigenous water protectors from Standing Rock, fighting against the canceling of the Atlantic Coast Pipeline, and the Supreme Court ordered a halt of the construction of the Keystone XL. Thanks be to God. These are incredible pieces of good news, friends, and easy to miss in the clamor of living. For friends, the seeds of freedom, spontaneity, and love are being cast widely, seeking good, receptive soil. May we become part of that receptivity. In basketball and in ultimate frisbee, you pivot to change directions in a critical time to find new openings that will get you closer to your goal. Friends, coming closer to our home, our church community home here at Covenant, we are called to pivot as well. And not just in the ways in which we gather for worship like we are now, but in ways that we look at things in new lights. We look at our sanctuary, that incredible gift that we long to get back to be together, to hug each other, and to be inspired by the awe of that neo-Gothic, incredible gift of human innovation. But 2, we come back, and we want to come back to that place with a critical eye. We know there are very few white people in the Bible, yet our Tiffany stained glass windows have plenty of white faces. And perhaps it's hard to hear, but these white faces are a form of white supremacy. The Eurocentric belief that's so deeply and sinfully embedded into much of our country, including our church's history, that wrongly believes in the superiority of white people over and above people of color. We're so deeply grateful that we have a sanctuary, and even in its complexity, we are grateful to ask questions of it and to ask questions of what the Spirit is calling us to. Our incredible building committee is preparing to submit a sizable matching grant to help repair the number of clear story windows that are desperately in need of stewardship and caretaking. We are so grateful for that work. We pray that it will succeed. So grateful for them and our council, which came together and agreed that as we submit this grant, we're going to dedicate 10% of all that is raised to commission an artist of color to help us re-envision the interior of our sanctuary and install new art that intentionally counters the ahistorical white images in our stained glass and provides more diversity and more accuracy to what God is doing in our world and as a part of our own faith tradition. If we get that grant, perhaps even if we don't get that grant, we will engage in this type of revisioning and building on the architecture, building on what the Spirit is saying, reformed and always being reformed. I'm grateful for our Presbytery's 21-day racial justice challenge. I know many of us are engaging in right now. It's not too late. It's been 6 days. They've been engaging in environmental justice recently. Please tune in as you can. You can find that in the bulletin. This is hard work, friends. It's tiring work, but it's essential work. And indeed, it can be joyful work. Reimagining our spaces where we worship so we can get a fuller sense of who God is. Going to protests and hearing songs and incredible young people and gatherings and people who see connections and building on those connections as a church and meeting new artists and all sorts of things. Eating vegan potlucks and learning from our Climate Jubilee leadership. Discussing the connection between food justice, racial justice. All of these things are good. They open us in new ways to a joyful invitation to see the abundance of the sower God who is sowing seeds all around us. So as we do so, and as the worship service concludes today, we will sing words from the 12th century penned by great mystic Hildegard of Bingen, who saw science and faith wrapped together in the world as one, the wonder of the world as revealing the wonders of God. She writes this, and we will sing it. O Holy Spirit, root of life, creator, cleanser of all things, anoint your wounds, awaken us with lustrous movement of your wings. May we sit by the sea with Hildegard, with so many others, and with Jesus, as we listen, as we contemplate, and as we're changed. Amen.